Hey guys, Jason again. I'm here with my friend Ross Githens. He's a professional counselor, and we're going to take a few moments and talk about the easy topic of talking to our kids and our teens about sex. So welcome, Ross, as we talk about this.
Yeah, this is going to be light, yeah.
Real light, real easy. And so let's just jump in. I've got an 8-year-old boy, a 6-year-old boy, and a 6-year-old daughter. And so as we think about kind of this topic in general, how do we start even at a young age, talk to our kids about this sensitive topic?
Well, I guess with my own kids, I have a 13-year-old and a 15-year-old. My goal was to establish that if I'm their teacher, I need to go ahead and start teaching them things that I think may not be age appropriate, but I want to start the conversation. So I say let's start with a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old. Obviously, we want to start teaching them words. Some people use medical, some people use nicknames.
Okay.
But we want to teach them, what are boundaries, what are parts, what's private, what are things that we do and don't do with these parts. For example, like sometimes the kids have a hard understanding of why they need to get dressed or why we need to put clothes on before the neighbors come over because they're comfortable. And so I think that we can teach them modesty without teaching them that you're bad or there's something you've done wrong.
Sure.
And I think that's where I like the beginning stages, 2 to 3, maybe up to 5 years old. We're having conversations that are age appropriate. So we're not hopefully teaching them new things, but we're hopefully answering questions. And I kind of believe that throughout most of the ages the goal is not to sit down with them with a book that young, obviously, but we need to kind of teach them, just the beginnings of body parts.
A framework.
Yeah. Foundation.
Okay.
But I'm also establishing, hopefully, I'm safe. I'm not awkward. And so guys and girls, I'm going to rely on guys to talk to boys.
Okay.
And I'm going to rely on women
Okay.
to talk to little girls. Because as a same-sex parent, we say that you are the most powerful human being in a child's life. So as a dad, I want to sit with my son and say, it is our job to be gentlemen. It is our job to be careful what we say, be careful what we joke about, because we don't want to ever use our aggression to hurt a woman.
Sure.
Just as I want a woman teaching her little girl what modesty means or what is appropriate or what's some things that they just don't understand. And
Right.
I think that's where I want us to be those primary educators. And I don't think it's ever too young. So if they're talking, we need to be having conversations.
Okay, so you have a 2-year-old. It's just 3-year-old, like you said. Very kind of, almost in some kind of detail, what are you kind of telling them specifically to help them understand?
Yeah, well, I obviously, like in my family, with my kids, we use medical terms. So we explained this is what it is, this is what it does, and obviously we don't get into sexual function. We
Sure.
just got into the bathroom and teaching them. And I think boys kind of naturally learn that difference because they stand, and so that's.
Yeah.
I made the mistake of using the restroom out in the country one time, and my boys were like, "We're never going to the bathroom inside again."
That's right.
And I think that's part of being a boy is that boys love being boys. They love breaking rules and doing things that are exciting and fun. But practically, at 2 to 3 years old, we're teaching them these are your parts, and they're private. They're not. They're to be covered, and we'll get into why later.
Sure.
Because at that age, you really can't.
It's just that kind of one principle right there they learn for safety, for all those kind of things.
That's
correct? And so you would say kind of 2 to 3 is kind of that first stage possibly.
Absolutely.
Of this. Kind of what would you say is kind of the next stage or the progression in conversation you're having with your kids?
I would say kindergarten years. So you're looking at 5 to what? Let's say 8 years old. So what's that? Kindergarten to 3rd, 4th?
Okay. That's where I'm at right now.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think we get into, okay, what are our media devices? So we have iPads, we have phones. I mean, my goodness, things are getting so powerful that a lot of our kids have unrestricted internet. And so as parents, I really think it's important that we start having conversations about, A, how am I protecting them? And B, I want them to be afraid of getting off the track because they're going to see things they don't want to see or accidentally see. So practically, something we do in my house is we have protected the internet. So for example, you can buy routers, you can buy devices that will block any internet porn that's even typed on in the house.
Okay.
And we thought that was a good investment because growing up in my house, there was no such thing.
Just free for all.
And so you literally have all that the world knows at your fingertips and unrestricted access to internet. And so I don't think a child at any age under 18 should have that. And so, especially in those kindergarten years,
Yeah.
those elementary years, we want a child to be protected and not seen as few naked images as possible, or
Right.
even more graphic or aggressive than that.
Sure. So let me ask you this. If a child accidentally kind of does find some kind of image or some kind of thing they watched, and they come to you or you catch them,
Yep.
how would you respond to that child?
Obviously in love. I think the gut reaction, the impulse is shame and anger and embarrassment and
Right.
how could you do this? Or there's a dirty response I hear a lot. And I don't want to ever associate that shame, that punishment so quickly with something that probably felt good somewhere in their brain.
Okay.
They're not old enough for it to feel good in their body yet.
Right.
But I don't want to punish them for something that, if I'm the dad, it's really my fault.
Sure.
I want to take that humility to
Yeah.
say, I gave you an unrestricted phone. I gave you an unrestricted device.
You found this.
Right. Now, can they still find ways? Yes. And I think
Yeah.
that's part of modern technology with TVs and TV shows. They're constantly pushing. I mean, Netflix, for example, I don't know what kind of rating system we're even using right now.
Sure.
Because remember, the rating system was designed for movie theaters.
Yeah.
And so now Netflix can produce their own show and put it out, and I mean, my goodness, they are pushing more and more the line
Yeah.
of what was even allowed 5 years ago, 10 years ago in an R-rated movie.
Right.
So I think we're in a dangerous world because now how many kids have access to Netflix?
Yes. With
And
no
so-
filters, no nothing, right?
And there is, if you set up a kid account on Netflix, it's protected.
Yeah.
But they can just click over to an adult account. And,
Right.
And so we're in a. I guess what I want to do is protect my kids that they don't just have this free time to do anything that's. So for example, we buy cameras in our house, and I like having a camera on a screen so they know at all times that screen is either opening to the room, and I want to have access to it.
Wow.
But I like the accountability because I want them to know at all times I can come back and listen
And see what's going on.
or look, what's going on, because I want them to have that accountability. I guess that's something I wish I would have had
Sure.
30 years ago when I was a kid and growing up. Because once again, our job as adults is I want to provide as much protection as humanly possible, knowing that you can't do everything right. Then I want to teach the child, hey, and so at 8 years old, these are the beginning conversations of saying, hey, there are dangerous things. There's things out there that I don't want you to see. Much like I would teach my 8-year-old, hey, I want you to ride your bike on the sidewalk.
Right.
But if you ride your bike in the street, I'm not being mean, you can get hurt.
Yeah.
And if you get hit by a car, you're not going to live.
Yeah.
And that's really hard to convince an 8-year-old of that because they're bulletproof. They are in their superpower years.
Sure.
But once again, I think that's our job as a parent, is I want to teach them things that I'm afraid of that they're not afraid of yet.
Yeah, we were talking earlier about this kind of two sides of this, of protection of your kids, but also the gift of what sex is in its proper place, and trying to kind of counterbalance both those things
It's good.
at a young age. And so that's hard for parents to do. And, and I have 2 little boys, and thinking about just the images that are out there now and trying to protect them from that thing. Even at 8 years old, we have the conversation, these are good pictures and these are bad pictures. And we have to watch out for those things, because what scares me as a parent is my house is pretty locked down, as much as I can tell, but it's going to a friend's house or a family member's house, and you don't know what's going to happen there. And so it's just trying as best you can to be vigilant there and have those kind of rules in place. But also, as you mentioned, being a safe place for your child to come when they see something. Because it's going to happen at some point for most kids, I'm assuming.
It is. And so what you referred to earlier, I love, is what happens if we catch a child looking. I'm going to count the number of exposures to how much damage has been done. Because an exposure does not ruin a kid.
Okay.
When a child looks at porn weekly, from the age of 10, 8, whatever the early onset is, and they are looking at it daily, weekly, for thousands of hours.
Yeah.
That is part of the deadening of the brain that we've studied. And I think that is what's really bad, is that what me and you are calling bad is not the average picture in pornographic websites.
Right.
It is vile. It's getting worse.
Yes.
Because it has to.
Yeah.
Because the average viewer is getting deadened.
Right.
So they need even more aggressive
Has to escalate,
things.
right?
It has to escalate.
Yeah.
So back in the 80s, we would call it softcore or hardcore, or they would put X ratings on it.
Right.
Nowadays, there's none of that.
Right.
It is the most vile in the beginning.
And we had to work it's almost impossible to find it at that age. And
Right.
now it's a click away
Yep.
on dad's cell phone, right?
That's right.
And so that's just sobering to think about on some level, isn't it?
It is. So what I say is, I don't mind the kid being on dad's cell phone, but where's the kid? Is he isolated? Is he alone? Is it after bedtime hours? So something we did with our internet is we have our internet turned off from 9 p.m. to 6 a.m., for example, on a weeknight, and let's say 11 to like 6 a.m. on a weekend. And that way they can play Xbox, they can play iPad, whatever the things are, approved through my internet. But I do not want a kid on that much internet. And so I joke that it's a better parent than me because it is consistent. At 9:01, I got a kid in my room because he's holding a device that doesn't work, you know?
Right. Their device is gone now, right?
And so my other issue is then what will happen is if they have phones, then they just switch to cellular because they're smart.
Sure.
Or they've even tried to get on the neighbor's Wi-Fi, and I'm like, high five. Like, I'm impressed. Like, that's clever.
It's initiative is what it is, right?
But I think that's part of, they're bored, they're curious.
Yeah.
They don't want to go to bed at 9 o'clock.
Yeah.
They want to watch YouTube for 14 hours.
Right.
And the amount of nudity. And I don't trust YouTube to filter
it
things for my
correctly.
kids.
Right.
They're going to keep pressing the line.
Yeah.
But if we're in that, that elementary age of, let's say kindergarten to 3rd, 4th grade, I want to be having these conversations. I even like a check-in. Like something we do with our boys is I would say, hey, do you have any questions? Is there a word you've heard and you don't understand?
Okay.
And my oldest came in and he said, I just want to know what the F word means. And I was like, what a great question of him not getting in trouble, not going to shame him.
Heard at school, right?
Right,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
And so I told him, I said, listen, it's a word that refers to people who have sex that don't love each other.
Yeah.
And he goes, why would you do that? And I was like, great answer.
It's good.
But I want there to be a safety because what happens is kids hear jokes, kids hear adults talking that shouldn't be talking about things. I don't want a kid taking a question of ignorance to another kid.
Right.
I want that kid to come to me because if I'm the expert, if I'm the resource for them,
Yeah.
I want to either answer the question or tell them, hey, I don't know the answer to that,
You want to be the safe teacher.
but I will get back to you. And
Okay.
I pull out Urban Dictionary and I type it in because, let's be honest, every generation likes to make up words,
Sure.
like to make up nicknames.
Yeah.
And so I type it in that dictionary, I educate myself, and then I'm able to go back to my son and say, okay, listen, because I love doing that with my 13-year-old now. He likes to quote things, and I'm like, hey, don't say that. Like, where'd you read that?
Yeah.
And he's like, well, I found it online. I'm like, okay, listen, please don't say that. That's horribly inaccurate. Like, you're going to look stupid saying stuff like that. And I think, once again, if I'm his informant, then I want him coming to me and not afraid I'm going to get in trouble.
Right.
But I want him to come to me and say, hey, I heard this sexual slang word. What does this mean?
Sure.
And I want to medically say, okay, this is what this is. So I want to solve that curiosity and then bring in the truth of, the gift of sex.
Yeah.
Why we believe it is a earned gift that marriage allows.
Right.
And that's something we talked about earlier, is I don't want to shame sex and tell my children sex is terrible, sex is bad, sex is always horrible, private parts, don't let anyone ever touch those.
Right.
And then y'all get married and we're like, okay, y'all go do that thing we told you was terrible.
This vile thing now.
And then they're in my
permission.
office as a counselor and they're like,
Yep.
we don't want to have sex because it's terrible.
Right.
And it's an unbearable event and we just do it because we have to. And it's just this weird contortion of like successful purity, but at what cost? Mm-hmm. So how do we balance that as parents?
Well, and that's not biblical either.
Yeah.
Because God created sex as a gift to us. And you think about this idea of what you're talking about, it seems like this kind of idea for a parent is we want to be safe on one hand, where they can trust to come to us, but also to be a good teacher and a good protector on the other hand. And that's a skill that we have to learn, right? Yep. And so let's just keep going for a minute. So as my boys are getting older and as the conversation progresses, as their freedom progresses, right? How do you kind of move forward to kind of like those early teen years, older elementary kind of age?
With my kids, I think that, middle school years, let's just cover middle school years, 12, 13, 14.
What a fun time, right? Middle school.
Yes.
Oh, man.
And so every word said is referred to sex, right? Because now they've learned what sex is and they have some idea of what they think sex is, or it's been explained medically. I think that's part of teaching appropriateness. But what's interesting is my kids have kind of pushed back and said, hey, this is kind of awkward. This kind of makes me uncomfortable.
Okay.
And so something I worked with my boys is to say, listen, I know it's uncomfortable. I know this is not a topic that you want to discuss with me, but I'm your resource. So we need to still talk about these things.
Yeah.
And I need you to remind you this is not a bad thing. Because I think they're being successfully taught that sex needs to be discussed outside the home. It shouldn't be discussed in the home.
Yeah.
Sex is something you discuss with your friends, and it's bad, and they begin to cuss in middle school, for example.
Kind of secret, too,
That's
right? Yeah.
And so then it becomes this kid-only place that they don't understand what they're doing.
Right.
Or they make jokes that they really don't understand what they mean.
Yeah.
Because I do that a lot with my kids. I'll hear them make a joke, and I'm like my oldest would say, that's what she said. And I was like, do you know what that means?
Right.
Because he was arguing with me because he wrote that on some woman's Facebook about her son. And I was like, yes, my 15-year-old child who has special needs, but he didn't understand the context. And so he got mad at me. He was like, Dad, everything you point out is sex, sex, sex. That's all you think about, Dad. I'm like, it's not all I think about. But once again, he was making jokes that he had no idea had a sexual undertone, which made it so funny.
Right.
And he was getting frustrated with me that I wasn't allowing him. I had made him go delete the post.
Sure.
Because he was just teasing this woman saying,
yes,
that literal.
To him, it was innocent, right?
Yeah, that's what she said. Yeah. Not realizing that there is a backstory to the joke.
It's kind of precious, though, how innocent that is. Though. It really is.
It is.
It really is.
But I think there's that debate of, do I allow my kid to make an innocent comment, or do I kind of point it out and say, hey, that's inappropriate. We can't.
Right.
That's not funny. That's gross.
What's interesting is you talked about how for your boys, they said it's starting to be awkward, y'all talking about it. And I know you well enough. You're a counselor. This is what you do. You probably had these conversations with your boys from a young age. And in middle school, they're saying, this is awkward.
Yep.
And so I guess you just push through?
Well, I think that my wife, if she was here, she would talk about how intense I am. And so, guys, if we need to be honest, right? Sometimes we can lean a little too hard into a subject. So let's talk about guys. What we find with guys is guys enjoy side-to-side conversations, typically how me and Jason are sitting right here, right? So my joke is that guys build football stadiums, right? Because the seats are not face-to-face. Now, a coffee shop was built by women. How do we know that? Because all the seats are face-to-face.
Okay.
So if you find a daughter and a mom talking, they're going to be knee-to-knee, face-to-face. They'll even square their hips because that's part of women gauge eye contact and the way your body's positioned.
Connection.
So if you go on a romantic date and the couple's sitting back to back, we make fun of them, right?
Sure.
Even if they sit side to side, we still kind of make fun of that couple because that's weird,
Sure.
But we expect them to sit face to face. Now that's going to be a high intensity conversation, and I think that's what my boys are saying is that my intensity, because I take things so seriously,
it's a bit much for them.
It's a bit much.
Okay.
And so I think that as a dad, and that maybe for some dads out there, is we got to take a break. Like we got to chill sometimes and like have some casual conversations. Yeah. Maybe as we're doing something in the yard.
See, my wife right now is shaking her head yes about me right now. I know she is right now. And so because I'm the same way. I get very intense, and we're very similar in that way. Yep. And let's go there. Let's get super serious, super deep, and it gets awkward sometimes.
They fold. Yep. Yeah. And I think that's part of it's weird to say let's take something that's serious and treat it more casually. But I think the effectiveness as a dad,
that's good.
Women are so much better at this.
Yeah.
Women are so much better emotionally and socially. They tease us because we're just not equipped as they are.
Right.
And so when we're serious. It's like let's go to war.
Yeah.
My wife's like, calm down. Like you're way too serious here. But I think that's part of. I don't want to be kicked out of the conversation because that's not allowed.
Yeah.
My children are not going to fire me as their educator.
That's good.
So, but instead I need that, and they don't have the words to correct me as their educator and say, hey, you're kind of weird. You're freaking me out,
Just calm down right
now. Tone it down, Dad. You're talking way too fast and way too,
But you're ready to go. Like you read the book. You've seen the horror stories in your office, right? And so you're trying to protect them from that.
But I think what I'm trying to remind myself is that there are innocent times, there are innocent jokes. I don't want to ruin their curiosity or make them regret even asking the question.
It's being safe, right?
Right, because our parents, our grandparents were taught for many years that sex is terrible, sex should never be discussed, or they threw a book at them and never talked to them, including my father, good man, but just was so awkward that I never talked to him. And he taught me very early, don't ever talk to me about this.
Yeah.
And then, like, the day before I get married, he's like, hey. I'm like, no. Like, whoa.
We're good. We're good.
I've already asked all my questions. Like, like it was just incredibly awkward. But I think that's my hope, is not to be intense, but to be casual, be relaxed, have the conversation.
Okay.
And I think that rolls us naturally into high school, where now you're going to get a lot of course, sex education. Because now we're hearing stories of kids that are hooking up, kids that are doing things they shouldn't be doing beyond a kiss. And I think that's one thing we're working with my kids is that we want to have rules. So, for example, we don't allow girls in their bedrooms. So we'll allow them to come into a living room or a game room where there's a door open at all times.
Right.
And the cameras. I love cameras. So we have cameras all through my house.
So they are watched.
Yes. In
Okay.
fact, I think every TV in my house has a camera over it. So I can not be in the room, not be a weird dad sitting in the back, staring at them. But I can find out if...
There's accountability.
Right. If I have a neighbor kid and a girl cuddling on my couch, I can call my son and say, hey, do you want to talk to them, or do you want me to talk to them?
Right.
Because you're going to be nicer,
Yeah.
You're going to be embarrassed if I have to talk to them.
See if you want to handle this right now without me doing it, right?
Exactly, because I saw the camera and they're kissing, or they went. We had one child went outside and went behind my gate to my backyard where there's no cameras, and I was like, this is I'll need 35 cameras to not saying that
You're
can't
vigilant.
win.
I'll give you that. You're vigilant.
But I'm not stupid, and I think that's part of the intensity, right?
Yep.
I'm
Yep.
always listening, especially if it's a guy-only party. That's easy.
Sure.
My guard maybe lowers.
Yeah.
Or we all know those kids that
Yeah.
there are neighbor kids that I trust, and there's neighbor kids that I'm like, we're evangelizing. Can I say it that way?
That's good.
We're trying to be a safe place for them. But
Yeah.
my fear is that they're going to come in and hurt my kids.
Of course.
Or bring a vape, or bring something that we've never seen put around my kids.
Yeah. That's so hard, isn't it?
Ugh.
Because you want to be a safe place for kids who don't necessarily have the good news in their
Yes.
household, but you want to protect your kids at the same time.
Yeah.
And so any rules or boundaries as you talk about that?
Well, I mean, me and my wife just try to have open dialogue about who is this kid, have we met their parents,
Yeah.
and then obviously we hear them kind of offending. We've had kids cuss in my house pretty openly because they can cuss at their home, and so how do we have that conversation? We had a kid who said he knew nothing about Easter, so it is shocking. I mean, to be a Christian family in the South, it's shocking to me to hear people who know so little about the gospel.
For sure.
But once again, how do we provide a safe place? Or we do clean versions, because they all love rap. They love, like, the more cussing, the more gang, the better, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So is there a clean version of that? Or is there a clean radio set of that? And so that's something we do where we can have good modern music for them.
Right.
Because we're not going to put on, K-Love and
Right.
have a Christian party and
Sure.
and they're ticked, right?
Yes.
Because they want their music, but they're not playing that music on the radio. So why would they play that music, right? Because that's what's
Absolutely.
crazy. Is
Right.
they have clean versions of these songs
Okay.
already produced.
All right, let's switch gears for a minute. We talked about kind of like boys a decent amount, and I know we're two men talking about this, so it might be a little difficult, but for moms and daughters, as they're kind of walking through this, what advice would you give them?
I think it's the same advice of how does a woman teach her little girl that you are precious, you are valuable, you are taught to be desired, to be pursued, and you're going to want that. She wants that.
Yeah.
But how does a woman have a backbone and say, but let me tell you what I'm worth? Because
Yeah.
if I'm a daughter of the king,
Sure.
right,
Yeah.
then the king hasn't given my dowries what the scripture says, right? I'm not given my hand in marriage. So intimacy beyond, I guess, I don't know if we would call it simple kissing,
Yeah.
I think that's where I want that boundary to begin to be set of
Yeah.
what is the intent, what is sex once again,
Yep.
what is the act, what is the gift, and I would love for moms to teach little girls how beautiful sex is,
Yeah.
how it's something that is wonderful for intimacy, for spirituality, for that we can be lovers and
Yeah.
enjoy it. I worry that modern culture teaches women that if you enjoy sex, that you're dirty, you're
Right.
broken, you're
Right.
of the world. And I would hate to hear mothers teach their daughters that.
Yeah.
Because I think it will lead to them having difficult marriages.
Yeah.
Because then they're going to hate what they were taught to hate.
Sure.
So much as like racism is taught, I think hating sex can be taught.
Absolutely.
Because I think there is an inbred selfishness that happens in early marriage.
Yeah.
Where we just do what we want to do what we want to do.
Right.
And so sacrifice, it has to be taught through children. And that's something I want to work with my boys. I would want if I had girls, I would want my wife
Yeah.
to say, I'm a servant leader. Because, right, good marriage, servant selfish, right?
That's
There's a
right.
seesaw.
That's right.
And so I want my son to clean a room that he didn't trash because he loves us. He loves my wife.
Yep.
Instead, I get attitude, and he's like, well, I didn't make this mess, right?
Mhm.
So why am I cleaning up a mess I didn't make? And I'm
Yeah.
like, you're just walking into a day of being a parent. You
That's
know?
right.
But I love a message that a woman would, share, of course, Psalm 139, of that you are valuable, you are precious, you are beautiful, you're fearfully and wonderfully made. Because I want a woman's esteem in God, a woman's esteem in the Bible. I don't want a little girl that's yearning for a male's attention because dad's aloof, dad's not present, dad's not
Right.
paying attention. And so I think that's a guy and a girl, it's a husband a father and a mother's attention to that little girl, I think gives her that solid foundation, that solid backbone that she doesn't need a man.
Right.
She doesn't need a boyfriend.
She's valuable.
She's valuable.
Because God made her.
Right.
Yeah.
Because what I say is a godly single woman is not a woman who's lonely.
That's right.
It's a woman who is alone. It's a
Right.
woman who desires to have children, to have a
Right.
husband.
Right.
But I want that woman to be solid and to be the happiest single woman you ever met in your life.
Right.
Because she is content in the gospel. She's content in godly relationships
Yeah.
with women and with men that are strict, that are boundaried.
Right.
And I think that, I think that's something I want to teach my kids in high school is I don't want to teach my kids to set up to fail.
Sure.
So, for example, I would love for my high schooler to say, I am dating a girl, we're juniors in high school, and we went over to her house and there was no one home.
Mm-hmm.
And we decided to leave because we knew that would not be a good place for us.
Not a wise thing.
Because I find Christians make more mistakes because what happens is they get a little bolder, they get a little braver, they think they're stronger than they actually are.
I trust their gut for a moment, right? Yeah.
And so I have a high schooler, let's say he's a good kid, let's say he's not a good kid. If he pressures the woman long enough,
Yep.
I don't think that's human. I don't
Yep.
think anyone can withstand that. I'm not
Right.
making fun of that little girl.
Absolutely.
But I think it's foolish from
That
the
age,
onset.
that pressure.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I think there's boundaries. I want a couple in the beginning, and I know we're talking about kids here, but even in high school relationships, even early college relationships, where I want a couple to say, these are things we're not willing to do.
Right.
And so because of that, these are decisions, these are times we can't spend time together
Yeah.
unless we're accompanied or in a public setting or in some type of public. And I mean, the living room of my wife's parents' house was public to us.
Absolutely.
That's what I'm referring to,
Yeah.
public. Or we would go sit in a Brookshire's parking lot just to be alone.
Man, you were smooth back in the day. Brookshire's, huh? Golly.
Well, we didn't want to drive because we didn't have any money. but if there's 50 people at her house, we couldn't be alone.
Right.
But it was a great place for us to go talk and to laugh and to
Sure.
talk and to be alone without being tempted.
Right.
So it was kind of public, kind of private. And that's where I would love a couple to kind
That's
of
right.
be wise.
Well, this is so countercultural right now, isn't it? To think about a 16-year-old thinking with that kind of mindset. But that is that teaching portion for a parent, right? To
Yes.
prepare their kid
Yep.
for the reality of the world.
That's it.
The reality of what they're going to be possibly tempted to do.
Yep.
You know? And so that's hard.
Yep.
That's the work, though.
But can fathers teach a son, I'm afraid of me? Can a father teach his son, I don't drive on that side of town?
Yeah.
Not for race issues, because I know that if women who work on the street are in those neighborhoods,
Yeah.
if those massage parlors, whatever the temptation is,
Yeah.
I don't want a man saying, that would never get me. I'm stronger than that.
You're teaching your kids vulnerability, right?
Absolutely.
Well, it's like the same filters for your son's computer are on my computer, right?
I like it.
Because we're all prone to wonder, right? That's what
Yes.
the song says. And so it's teaching your kids that kind of thing. Because that teaches something. It also reminds them that you're a safe person
Yep.
that walks the same kind of struggles too, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Because I want a dad to say, I'm not going to let you yell at your mom because you don't hear me yell at your mom.
Yep.
I want you to treat her as good as I treat her.
Yep.
That's not hypocritical.
Right.
That is saying, I need you to follow in my example, and when you disrespect her, I want to light you up because I don't yell at her.
That's right.
I don't let anyone yell at her.
And she's mine.
Right.
Yeah.
And you're our kid, and you think I'm going to let you disrespect her?
Sure.
And then I have to calm down because she's like...
Take your breath.
Yeah, then I get
it's
in
her
trouble.
baby,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's the triangle of fight because I'm yelling at him, he's yelling at her, and she's yelling at me.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. Isn't it? It's just a beautiful thing. Let me ask you this. So you think about, for mothers with sons and fathers with daughters, what is their role to play in this?
I think it's teaching how to love the opposite sex.
Okay.
Because how many boys, I mean, me, you, and Luke were just talking about a story. There
Yeah.
are times women get emotional and men don't understand.
Sure.
Because to a man, we're like, you shouldn't be crying.
Right.
Why are you crying?
Right.
Because as a man, I'm saying, here's this woman who's being a terrible man.
Yeah.
Right? She's upset over something that only hurts her sex. It
Sure.
doesn't hurt our sex. And so I want I want a father teaching his daughter, this is how a man dates a woman. This is how what biblical pursuit is.
Yeah.
I'm going to buy you a flower. I'm going to open the door. I'm going to honor you. I'm
Yeah.
going to respect you and be careful how I talk to you.
Right.
And I want a woman teaching her son that you can't be selfish and be rewarded for that.
Okay.
That's not loving.
Yeah.
If you do nice things for your mom, you're going to feel good about yourself.
Yeah.
That is a glimmer of husband love.
That's good. That's good.
And there's going to be times that mom's going to be crying, and the son's going to look at dad and he's going to be like, hey, dude, don't get me in trouble. Like, I don't know why she's crying either, you know? But dad's learned, and dad will model that we come in and we love her,
Yeah.
whether we understand why she's crying or not.
We're just there.
And son, of course, will come behind
Yeah.
and do exactly what dad did. Because I don't know, I have questions too. Dad's looking at, son's looking at dad just like, don't talk, don't talk.
Just hug.
We're gonna
pat.
be here.
Yeah.
Because I think that's modeling, I think is it taught, is it caught? Remember that? So,
Yeah.
So yes, I want to instruct, hopefully not intense, but right, then is
Yeah.
it caught, right? I mowed the yard, I washed my wife's truck. I don't need an award. I don't need a pat on the back.
Yeah.
I'm a lover of hers.
It's our calling, right?
Right, he
Yeah.
caught me loving her.
Yeah. That's good.
Just as I want a man caught reading the scriptures.
Mm-hmm.
Because I want his son to see that's a habit of my example.
Yeah.
That's what my leader, my alpha,
Yeah.
because and something, my boys were real little, and I heard them coughing, and I realized they were making fun of me coughing. And so I get upset, and my wife's like, no, they're modeling. You're a boy, and they're trying to learn how to cough like you.
Okay.
And so guys get upset because they're like, you're making fun of me, you're disrespecting me.
Oh, yeah.
And women, thank God for women, they provide wisdom in that
Context.
moment.
Yeah.
Like, why are you mad about this?
Yeah.
You went and used the bathroom in the woods. They refuse
Oh,
to
yeah.
use the bathroom indoors now. You know?
Yes.
They have to model the example that's given them.
Yeah.
Now, what's ironic is I see clients in my office, the mom smokes. And I'm not judging smokers.
Yeah.
But then she has the nerve to ground her 14-year-old who smokes.
Yeah.
Well, the 14-year-old had a bad day.
Right.
What has mom modeled the child to do when you're stressed out? Smoke a cigarette.
Yeah.
That's our only coping skill.
Sure.
And so I would like to believe that my sons are going to grow up seeing me exercise or reading the word or talking to their mom with the door shut.
Laughing with your wife.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
But even having conflict with her.
Absolutely.
Like we're going to disagree, but you're never going to hear us yell at each other.
Yes.
Because I wouldn't let another man yell at her, so I don't want to let me yell at her.
Or teach them to yell at her.
That's right. And so I hear this a lot. Well, we only yell behind closed doors. I'm like, well, that's great.
Yeah.
Well, they just put their ear to the door and...
You have a soundproof wall in your house.
like where are you fighting with her like this?
Yeah.
Well, it wasn't in front of them. I'm like, oh, yeah.
Sure.
But once again, that's the calling of being a parent, is I need to, number one, work on the teacher, educate the teacher.
Yeah.
God, help me restrain me, help me make good decisions, let me run my life, and then I'm going to ask my son to duplicate my example, even as painful as that is, because I hate my example sometimes.
Of course.
But the humanity of forgiveness, the humanity of an apology, the humanity of my wife correcting me and me allowing her to correct me.
That's right. Humility.
Humility.
Yeah, it's a framework we're talking about during this weekend of our kids to be discipled need time with their parents. We need to really celebrate milestones in their life. We need to capture moments. And I feel like all three of those things are at play when we talk about sex. Mm-hmm. Like we have to, it's a trickle over time. It's not one big talk. It's 1,000 talks, right?
1,000.
It's time with your kids. Mm-hmm. It's these milestones in their life. As they progress, their body changes. They have questions. And we don't say those are bad things. Those are gifts from God, right? That puberty happens. That we now want things we didn't want when we were 6 years old. That's a good thing. And then there's those moments, right? Those moments when your kid is curious, when your kid messes up, that we at that point as a parent have a really unique, and that's one of the beauties of being a parent. That only we are in those moments as a mom and a dad.
I just don't want dads or moms waiting for their kid to ask questions.
Okay.
I don't know. Yes, I gave that advice when you had an elementary kid, but I don't think it's fair for a middle schooler or a high schooler to be burdened with coming to confront me on their sexual questions.
Okay.
I would rather an adult say once a week, once a month, hey, you got 5 minutes. Now, they're going to feel like they're in trouble because remember, kids associate attention with discipline.
Okay.
But now there's poking the bear. Hey, do we need to talk?
Right.
Hey, do you have any questions? Go ahead.
So walk me through this. So you're going to have your 14-year-old, right? You're going to sit down and say, okay, you have 5 minutes to ask.
I wouldn't even say that.
Okay.
Do you have any questions?
Okay.
We haven't talked about sex in a few weeks, few months. Has anything come up? Do you have any questions?
Okay.
I want you to know it's safe. I want you to know it's beautiful. But especially kids going through puberty,
Okay.
their body is in riot, is in violent change.
They feel different.
And they celebrate the height. They get upset about the acne.
Sure.
They brag about the gains, right? But we need to talk about what's happening to your body. What is the testosterone that's flowing through your veins?
Yeah.
Why is your heart racing? I'll never forget being 15, 16 years old.
Yep.
And I could have just fought somebody.
Yes.
Because it's just like my body is surging, coming alive.
Mine's still that way, actually, at 40. And so, but I'm glad that you had that experience when you were younger. And so, no, that's good, though. So you would say like 12, 13, you kind of start those conversations like that?
Yes. I mean, you're going to see the signs of puberty. If you're looking at a kid daily, you're going to see the acne, you're going to see the voice dropping,
Sure.
You're going to see those steps of our little boy is not a little boy anymore. And we don't need to lie to ourselves and say, okay, well, I'm going to wait till he's 15. It's too late.
And that world's progressing so fast now anyways, right?
And I think and that's where, and that may be another conversation, but what apps am I allowing on their phones?
Sure.
Because Snapchat's a great example of an app designed to send naked pictures. It is only the design when they got famous was they're going to send a picture that would dissolve, that would delete itself. But I want to teach my kids anything created digitally is never deleted.
Yes.
Never.
Yep.
Because now we're hearing girls who interview, and what they did in college and high school is factoring into the interview.
Right.
Because you just Google their name, and everything that's ever been taken about them shows up immediately.
And of course, if you share something as well, you're doing
just
something
once.
illegal. Yeah.
Yes.
And so
because it's two. It's actually creating and sharing is 2 felonies, and they're getting more strict. And so I think that's once again a conversation I want a woman to have with a little girl. Is the camera on her phone it can be an issue.
Yeah.
Because what we're finding with modern generation is these boys are pressuring these girls, and the words they're using are, hey, I'm bored, send me something. I deleted what you sent me last time. And so they're getting fresh images.
Yeah.
And so these girls think, oh, my face is not in it. Right? He can't hurt me. But what happens is he'll put 10, 15 pictures together. Then they get in a fight. They break up. He then shares and shares.
Yeah.
And then she's mortified.
Sure.
But I think, once again, we want to have these conversations of what is the world? What is the world allowing? What's the world saying that's okay?
What is reality, right, from the world's perspective?
And then is the gospel here? What does the good news require of us?
Yeah.
What are we missing? That God says no for our protection, not for cruelty.
Right.
And if we love God, we trust God, and we don't hate him for the protection.
Yeah. And we're going to flee from these things, right? Because we know they could be an issue.
Yeah. But I'm meeting couples in their 20s who've had 10 partners, 15 partners, 25 partners, and they're divorcing because they're not sexually compatible. Where is that in the gospel?
That's right.
It does not contain any scripture.
That's right.
Because compatibility, to me, should be perfect world. It would be 2 virgins.
Right.
And I think that is becoming an anomaly nowadays. Because no one even thinks it's possible. I have parents who aren't even asking their kids that because they're so hopeless that it can even be done.
Yeah. All right, well, let me kind of follow up with this, maybe kind of start wrapping up as we think about this. So you mentioned that, the virginity. So your kid comes to you and they have blown it, right? Either they've been sexually active or they're looking at pornography on a habitual basis. Mm-hmm. How would you counsel those parents?
I would beg that kid to find someone that can hold them accountable that's not mom and dad.
Okay.
Because just in a loving relationship, it's very difficult for someone that close to be understanding and forgiving for the repetition it's going to take for the healing. Okay. So yes, obviously I want mom and dad involved, but if, for example, the teenage son were to find a youth leader, someone that mom and dad respect, that is living a life we trust, then now we're talking about steps to freedom, steps that are going to undo the damage that's already been done.
Okay.
Because, of course, compare a match to a bonfire. We want to catch the fire as early as possible,
Sure.
that has done as least amount of damage. But I would never tell a kid who's blown it that it's been blown. That is not possible.
Yeah.
That would limit the healing potential of God.
Yeah.
So I think that, to me, I want confession as soon as possible because I want that kid to feel bad for what he's doing and take a step forward.
Yeah.
And what I feel like the shame cycle is, I feel bad, so I go back to it. I
hide.
feel bad, and I've already done it.
Yeah.
We've already slept together once. What's 10 more times going to do?
Right.
Or what's worse is that I have a couple that's already broken that, and then they quit, and then they start fighting month out, 3 months out, 6 months out, because they've now lost that intimacy they once had.
Yeah. Okay.
But I think that, to me, I agree that we want there to always be redemption in the parents' eyes, that we're not shaming them, we're not disappointed, we're not devastated.
Right.
You've ruined everything.
Yeah. That's the fear, right? That's the pendulum swing of we stop believing the gospel is real even for our kids.
Yeah.
Because we have kind of put them up here, and sin changes that, but God can still heal through that sin.
Yeah.
That's good. Any last things you want to encourage our parents with as we talk about this?
Yeah, I mean, I think my goal is to love our kids, and I think that's the goal, is we want to lead them and we want to love them. And I think we want to, Old Testament, we want to present the truth, present the expectations, which are very high.
Mm-hmm.
Me and you sin on a daily basis.
Right.
And so then we switch to the New Testament, is I want the grace, the mercy, the most attractive parts of Christ I want to be in our parenting.
Yeah.
Is the redemptive side of no matter what you have done.
Yeah.
Because I love reading the stories of Jesus as he was with the woman at the well, as he was with all these many stories of adultery. He was not the cruelest to them.
Yes.
He was the cruelest to the religious.
That's right.
So I think that I don't want my faith to become a rigidness, a merciless Old Testament, but instead a merciful Savior that has an answer for every healing, every depravity that me and you, all of us are struggling with.
Right.
But I think that's part of, welcoming my children into adulthood is to say, we are in a battle.
Yeah.
And that, yes, to my boys, your eyes are your blessing and your curse.
That's right.
And to my girls, your ears are your blessing and your curse.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of recognizing those sexual differences in us. And then for the fathers to teach their sons, this is how I protect my eyes. This is what I protect. These are times. These are things I avoid. These are ways I preview a movie before I even watch it.
Right.
And to my girls, to say your words are powerful, but the words can cut. And how cruel these girls are being to each other.
Right.
Because they're speaking death instead of speaking life. And I think
right.
that I want a mom to say, hey, I want to gossip too. Hey, I want to be mean verbally sometimes too. But this is how I've protected myself. This is how I've learned to not hurt when I want to hurt.
Yeah.
And that provides an example from that little girl to get out of natural and get into the gospel.
It's good.
But we have a world that teaches only do what feels good.
That's right.
Do what naturally feels good. And that has been the message of the enemy from the Garden of Eden.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's good. Listen, we couldn't cover every possible nuance of this conversation during our time together, but Ross is going to be with us on Sunday morning, and we're going to have some live Q&A. So please be there on Sunday at 9:30, and you can ask all your questions then, and we'll do our best to answer them. So thank you for this. Thanks, Ross.
Thank you.